Can racism cause post-traumatic stress? This question is increasingly being posed by prominent mental health professionals who argue that it can. They contend that individual and institutional discrimination are often overlooked as contributing to post-traumatic stress. Psychologist Robert Carter, for example, has argued for something that he calls race-based traumatic stress injury. He says this diagnosis should be used in a non-pathologizing way by clinicians as a means to identify and to understand the traumatizing impact that racism has on members of minority groups. Carter asks us to consider the following vignette. A light-skinned Hispanic male is treated courteously when he looks at an apartment he wants to rent in New York City. However, when he comes back to look at it again with his African-American wife, the renting agent becomes aloof and tells them the apartment is no longer available. After being denied the apartment, the wife becomes depressed. She starts having trouble sleeping, and she starts reporting nightmares. She even displays some mild paranoia and begins to show a variety of other symptoms too. Her hair starts falling out, her skin becomes dry, and she experiences constipation. These symptoms, according to Carter, might be best accounted for and understood using his proposed race-based traumatic stress injury diagnosis. Building on Carter's work, psychologist Janet Helms has identified 3 kinds of racially charged events that potentially lead to trauma. The first is a direct cataclysmic racial or ethnic cultural event that involves threatened death or injury. An example of this would be race-based hate crimes. However, natural disasters and wars would also qualify here if their effects are made worse by racism. The coronavirus pandemic would also likely qualify because it has disproportionately sickened and killed Black and brown people in the U.S., in large measure due to discrimination and prejudice in the culture. Second kind of event would be a vicarious or witnessed cataclysmic event. This would be where someone witnesses discrimination or violence directed at others who share the same or similar racial or ethnic background. Seeing videos on television of police killing African Americans, such as George Floyd, is an example of a vicariously traumatic event for African Americans. Third kind of event would be racial and cultural microaggressions. Being called a racial slur, being followed around a store by a sales clerk, or being treated differently due to one's race are casual examples of discrimination that can be traumatizing when they evoke memories of past individual or group traumas. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders defines trauma more narrowly than Carter and Helms do, and so clinicians using it may not diagnose victims of discrimination with PTSD. However, social justice advocates argue that mental health professionals must do a better job in accounting for the overt and subtle impacts of racial oppression on the experience of trauma. What do you think?